to the next story. This is a story that I feel that is underreported, or it flew under the radar. Remember how Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were bragging about the jobs number report? And later on at the Democratic National Convention, it was revealed by a CNN commentator that they found that those numbers had been fudged. So they were fudging the numbers and that there weren't as many jobs created as they said. Now let's move a step further. I've been telling you over and over again about unemployment, about the unemployment rate, about the homelessness rate in this country the past couple of years. Did you know that this year, the Black unemployment rate surged and the Biden administration didn't say anything about it? According to them, the economy was doing great. According to them, inflation was down. And according to them, they created all these jobs with good wages and everything was going okay. Now, let me ask you a question. Why is it that Kamala Harris, who's supposed to be the Black woman, wink, wink, candidate, why didn't she bring this up? Why didn't she bring up this here? The Black unemployment rate is consistently twice that of white workers, and here's why. The first time this was announced was in February, and then they talked about it again in May. We're going to go into the May video in just a second. A surge in hiring last month far exceeded expectations and kept the unemployment rate at a near historic low, but the strong performance didn't benefit everyone. The unemployment rate among Black men jumped to 5.3% in January. 5.3%. Nobody mentioned it. Biden administration didn't mention this at all. No word of it. That was rising from 4.6% over the previous month. This is data that was released by the U.S. Department of Labor. The U.S. Department of Labor released this data and they never mentioned it. The divergent fates of Black and white workers last month exemplify a broader disparity in employment between two groups that stretches back more than 50 years. Since the U.S. collected such data in 1972, the Black unemployment rate has consistently stood at levels twice as high as the unemployment rate among white people. The relationship has undergone occasional shifts up or down, but quickly returned to a level of 2 to 1. There is no relationship in the labor market that is nearly this consistent and stable. That's coming from Valerie Wilson, who is the director of a program on race, ethnicity, and the economy. Employment equity is essential to racial and economic justice because work is essential. It's people's ability to provide for themselves and their families. The ironclad disparity owes to continued discrimination in the job market, as well as persistent racial disparity in educational attainment and professional networks, highlight networks. Among other factors, economists and advocates told ABC News. This is something that I've talked about quite a bit, networking, because the reality is one of the things that I learned throughout my career is that it's all about who you know. And there have been a number of times where there are people who I interviewed myself that I thought were great applicants for the job, but because they didn't know the right person that was a part of the interview team, they didn't get the job. It's not always so much about who's the most qualified. Sometimes it's just about, are you friends with so-and-so? Do you know Steve in accounting? If you're having an interview in an accounting department, do you know someone in that accounting department? It helps. These are the kind of things that people don't really talk about when it comes to the job search. Because when you're putting in a resume, you're not alone. A lot of other people are doing that as well. So how do some people get the interview and others don't? If you have an internal referral, that's going to put you ahead of the other applicants. This is just a reality, guys. And I've worked in different industries. I saw this when I worked in healthcare. I saw this when I worked in higher education. And honestly, even when I was waiting tables when I was in college, I saw it then too. So the reason why this can tend to hurt Black Americans is because oftentimes we don't know people in those spaces to have that internal referral. Let's go on a little bit more here, and then we're going to get to that video. Racial differences in the unemployment rate stem in large part from ongoing discrimination that influences choices made by companies about which workers to add or lay off. Many economists use a shorthand to describe the conditions endured by Black workers: first fired, last hired. Between the late 1980s and mid-2000s, government employment data shows considerable evidence that Black workers are among the first ones fired as the economy weakens. This is very true. If you look on my channel and see the interview that I had with Professor Richard Wolff, he said this as well. Last hired, first fired. When the economy strengthens, meanwhile, Black workers often access jobs only after their white counterparts. These are things a lot of people don't want to talk about this, but it's true. We're usually not the first considered. As demand for workers grow and supply ebbs, employers turn to Black workers who they may have overlooked under different circumstances. So I want to take you to this clip here. This was in March. Unemployment rate among Black Americans jumped in the March job report. Now, when Joe Biden and Kamala Harris told you about the job report, they purposely left this information out. Let's get into it.
The March jobs report stronger than expected, with the broader unemployment rate dropping to 3.8%. Diving deeper into the data, though, the jobless rate for Asians and Hispanics both fell sharply to 2.5% and 4.5% respectively. But for Blacks, the unemployment rate actually surged to 6.4%, and that is the highest level since August of 2022.
Pause. The highest level since August of 2022. I want you to take a look at this graph. Look at who's the highest. The highest unemployment rate is for those who are disabled. And there's different reasons for that, right? Some people that are disabled, they cannot work at all. Like some people have different conditions about their disability. Some people are disabled, but they're still allowed to work. Some people are disabled and they're not allowed to work at all. So their number is going to be higher. But right after the disabled community, Black people are next. 6.4%. We have a higher unemployment rate than Hispanic Americans, white Americans, and Asian Americans. And even if you want to look at the racial demographic here, notice that white Americans still have a higher unemployment rate than Asian Americans. And this is consistent across the board with other issues, not just unemployment. This is also consistent with the wealth issue. When I've shown those numbers before on the show, where you see like who has wealth and who doesn't, who's at the bottom of net worth as well, guess who's at the bottom? We are. Black people are at the bottom. So you see the consistency. If we have the higher increase in unemployment and we have the wealth disparity because we never closed the racial wealth gap because we didn't implement reparations for descendants of slavery in this country, it makes sense that we would be at the bottom when we talk about net worth. Is Kamala Harris talking about this? Is Kamala Harris? I heard Donald Trump mention something about it, but is Kamala Harris talking about this? Jill Stein is talking about this. Cornel West is talking about this. But the so-called Black woman candidate isn't talking about this?
Joining me now to discuss this disparity in jobs and the impact on the economy is Mark Morial, President and CEO of National Urban League and the former mayor of New Orleans. Thanks so much for being with us. First, talk about why we have this. Why do we have this disparity, and what can we do about it?
It's not easily explainable, but it must have something to do with discrimination in hiring practices. I mean, how else could you explain this sort of aberration where the joblessness rate for every other ethnic group has gone down with the exception of African Americans? So I was surprised to see it. because this is otherwise a hot jobs report with significant job creation, 300,000 plus, 276,000 jobs average per month over the last year or so, 26 straight months of job creation above 200,000. It's a strange look. So what we should look for is whether this is an aberration, meaning a one-time occurrence, and what the job report looks like for African Americans next year.
So based on the article that I just read to you, this is not a one-time occurrence. This has been a trend over time. Okay, so he didn't do his research, but whatevs.
We see a trend. There's something happening out there that needs to be aggressively addressed.
If it is a trend, Mark, what tools are out there to basically fix it or do something about this?
Well, I think we should wait and see. I mean, it would be easy for me to react very quickly to this, but I'd like to see if it's a trend. But what we have, unfortunately, is still this last hired, first fired, if you will, phenomenon. And it may have something to do with these aggressive attacks on DE&I that are taking place.
So notice that his title said, he's a part of the National Urban League. I told you guys this before. The NAACP, the Urban League, they're not really doing for Black communities like they should. The NAACP and the Urban League, somewhere along the way, they decided to align themselves with the Democratic Party. Now, I have a question. If you are the NAACP and the Urban League, why are you aligned with any political party if your purpose is to help better and improve the Black community? Why are you aligned with any political affiliation? You shouldn't be aligned with anything. That's also using the assumption that all Black people are Democrats, and they're not. Most Black people don't vote. So why are you aligned with a political party? The NAACP right now, $20 million they raise to help get people out to vote for Kamala Harris. They announced it on Twitter. I saw it earlier today. Why not put that $20 million into Black communities? So you see, even some of these organizations that have Black in the name are not really using the resources in the way that they should to help out the Black community. They're more willing to put that money towards getting someone elected who doesn't even have a Black agenda. Can I say it again? Why is the NAACP putting money towards a candidate that doesn't even have a Black agenda? Why is that happening? These organizations became co-opted at some point in time. This is a problem. But I wanted to point that part out there. I wanted you to see that he was with the Urban League.
The impact of it being to drive up the Black unemployment rate. If that is so, then we're seeing a retreat from many commitments that were made post George Floyd in this nation towards a more equitable and just future. But I'm going to urge that this is a sign of concern, but I want to see, because from time to time we see in the jobs report months that are aberrations.
Oh, I think the video got.
I want to see, because from time to time we see in the jobs report months that are aberrations.
Yeah, sorry, that part there gets stuck. I think he's pretty much said, hold on. Sometimes it happens when I have too many tabs open. So sorry, you guys. We'll try to jump ahead again.
To highlight, I wonder, Mark, what's the impact of higher rates? Does that have a disproportionate effect on this part of the population as well when you have things like higher credit card debt and mortgage rates?
Look, when people are not working, they can't meet the basic necessities of life. So the higher the unemployment rate for any community, it makes it harder for them to meet the necessity of taking care of themselves and their loved ones. And that is simply a fact. In an economy with this type of growth rate and with these type of unemployment rates, we should see these declines taking place across the board. The demand for workers, and this is what we see, is very, very strong in the American economy today.
Right. And Mark, I wonder finally you could just sort of comment on where you think interest rates are going this year and how many are on the table. Do you think the economy is looking very strong by those top line numbers? Of course, there's nuances within them, but do you think there's more risk to the Fed waiting or cutting too soon?
Well, look, the Fed should stick to its plan to cut 3 times on the timetable they've outlined. What's important for Fed policy is for people to trust their plan and for us to be able to understand what the expectations are. In my view, we'd like to see the cuts take place sooner rather than later. Why? What's driving some of the lingering inflation are housing costs, which represent 1/3 of the consumer price index. So by driving down interest rates and making housing more affordable, making home ownership a little bit more affordable, it could have a positive impact on not only economic growth, but also on inflation.
So they're talking about the housing costs, which we all know housing is a big problem. But at the end of the day, like I said, that increase of that 6.4% of unemployment is a big freaking issue. And the way that I kind of see it is like, you driving down the cost of housing, which yes, housing is expensive, but the reality is if you're a part of that 6.4% that is unemployed, you're not going to be able to afford the house when they drive down the price anyway. You need a job. You need a job and you need a living wage. You need a living wage. David Pakman commented on this slightly. He was referring to when Donald Trump mentioned during a conference here that Black unemployment was under him. I want to show you this really quick. Listen to this.
Trump claiming that Black unemployment was never lower than under his watch.
But we achieved the lowest African-American unemployment rate and the lowest African-American poverty rate ever recorded.
Of course, that may have been true until Joe Biden. We have seen President Joe Biden actually preside over the lowest Black unemployment rate ever recorded, not Trump, and also the greatest acceleration of wages relative to inflation for Black folks dating back a very, very, very long time. Trump claiming that
So you heard what David Pakman just said there, right? And he said, well, that may have been true until Joe Biden. Why did David Pakman not inform his audience about what I just told you? 2024. Black unemployment increased the most, surged to 6.4%. Why didn't he tell his audience that? You know why? Because it's a bad look for the Democratic Party. And he doesn't want the Democratic Party to look bad. This guy speaks at the White House. This guy was at the White House in a room, in a meeting with Kamala Harris. So his job is to protect the Democratic Party. I mean, how hard is it? I just showed you this information. So for him to sit there and pretend like Black unemployment is okay, we're the highest unemployed group. Not only the highest group, but it surged. And he purposely leaves that information out. The Democratic Party isn't thinking about these things because you know what they're thinking about? They're thinking about teaching candidates how to dance because they think all that we want is entertainment. This is what they're busy doing.
So do you know how to wobble?
I'm sorry, what?
Do you know how to wobble?
Show me how you do it.
Oh, I can show you how to do it. You're going to pick up some votes, trust me.
Well,
this is all they think that they have to do for us. Does everybody understand this? All they think they got to do for us is do a dance and entertain. And of course, Roland Martin had to be the one to do it. Not try to fix the surge of Black unemployment, not focus on those things. Do you know how to wobble? And we all see that Hillary Clinton lost. Not do you have a plan for Black Americans? No, do you know how to wobble? Like I said before, when it comes to our community, they think all they have to do is entertain us. They have to talk about hot sauce in your bag. They got to talk about, let's do the Cupid shuffle. Let's bring in Meg the Stallion. All they want to do is entertain us and they think we're totally fine. And that's it. That's enough. That's all you got to do for them. That's it. That's all you got to do. That's part of the reason how we got here.